And it just told you it's being recorded. It just goes on our website after for, oh, there goes the truck. Yeah, it's gonna be really noisy on my side. I hope it doesn't disturb our session too much.
So good.
Okay, just resumed our recording. So while we wait on anyone else that was having trouble with the link to get in, one thing that we did in the last session was just kind of have everyone type where they are currently or which country you're from, and also what you do in music. So those who are in, you see Ariane, hope I'm not butchering anybody's name, Colette, Gio. Just let us know where you're from and what you do. I'll go first. So I just sent mine so everybody can see.
Oh, yeah.
So, Colette, I hope I pronounced your name right. Toronto, Vancouver, artist manager and brand consultant. Really cool. So all the artists that are in here, you have someone you can consult for your branding if you're looking for a manager. Come on, guys, don't be shy. Trinidad, living in Toronto, artist. Handful. Oh, okay, I know who you are. You're in our virtual festival. Nice to have you on, Ariane. Sean is a drummer, producer, experimental poet. Really cool. Welcome, Sean. And we'll get started really shortly. We just had a little link issue. So we're just trying to make sure that everybody who wanted to be here is able to attend.
Either way, though, this is recorded, you said, right?
Yeah,
so people can, so
yeah.
people can still access it, even if they don't necessarily make it, which is, it's good actually, if they can check it after.
Start in a minute. I'll just give them. Okay. Okay, everyone, I think we're just gonna get started. I guess people are struggling as they access the link. So welcome to our second workshop in the Afrowave virtual workshop series. Today we are gonna be speaking with Anthony and Kevin about grants, funds, and sponsorship. My name is Karis. If you've been at all the other workshops, you've probably heard this a million times. But I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself. So I'm a singer, songwriter, and music producer. I am also director of operations at AfrowaveTO. I started out solely on the creative side of the industry, making beats in my bedroom. And then I decided that I kind of wanted to learn the music business side. So I went to study arts management at Harris Institute, downtown Toronto. And from that, just kind of worked at different jobs in the industry that allow me to kind of see the intersection between the art side and the business side. And I've kind of just spent the last couple of years immersing myself in that, which is how I ended up at Afrowave. A little bit about Afrowave if you're not familiar. So what we do is provide a platform and resources for artists who are in what we call culturally derived genres. So soca, reggae, reggaeton, dancehall. We kind of noticed that these genres they get attention, but not as much as a lot of the other genres in the Canadian music industry. And we wanted to make sure that we were kind of leveling the playing field for the artists who are within those genres, which is why we decided to do this workshop series so that we could give you as much information as possible on different areas in the industry that would be beneficial to emerging artists. I'm gonna hand it over to Anthony and then I guess Kevin. They're just going to tell you a little bit about who they are, where they work, and how they kind of got into this music business.
Awesome. Thank you, Karis. So yeah, my name is Anthony Johnson. I am currently the project coordinator at Factor for our sponsorship program and our outreach. So Karis, this is actually interesting just listening to your journey because I've had a pretty similar kind of experience actually. So I myself also started on the creative side as a producer, later expanded into songwriting for other artists as well and becoming an artist myself. But then similar to you, I felt like that wasn't enough. I also wanted to know more about the business, just to kind of understand how everything worked. So that led me to interning at Warner Chappell, which is the publishing division of Warner Music. And then I worked at SOCAN, and then afterwards I heard about this thing called public funding and grants. And I just thought, what is that? Did a bit of research. I realized that it's actually possible for artists to get funded to make the projects. And I actually applied and got a grant. And that was a great experience. I learned a lot from it. And after that, I just wanted to learn even more all the ins and outs. So, and then I saw a job opening at Factor and here I am. That's kind of my journey.
Awesome. Kevin?
Hi, thanks for having me. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Reigh. I'm currently the Creative Communities Program Manager at the Toronto Arts Council. And if you're wondering what that means, the Creative Communities Program funds activities and organizations whereby professional artists engage communities in collaborative art making and skill development opportunities. So that's what I currently do as a 9-to-5. But much like the previous speakers, I started out as an independent artist in the city of Toronto. I'm considerably older than both of you, I believe. And so, I started off as an artist, spoken word, writer, a little bit of a singer-songwriter action as well. Used to do shows throughout the city of Toronto at venues that regrettably no longer exist anymore. The march of time, gentrification being what it is. But during that period, I also was curious about other aspects of, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to be involved in the cultural industry, the cultural sectors. Started volunteering for arts organizations, one in particular named Immersion. And through that, I started volunteering and then started working with them and had experience, learned about event management, grant writing, PR/communications, got, a little bit of exposure to a wide range of, skills really, and then from there, I've gone on, I worked at the Canadian Music Reproduction Rights Agency, Unity Charity, among other organizations, started doing freelance grant writing and consulting for artists and organizations. And all during that period found time to put out an album of spoken word and a couple of books of poetry, and here I am with you all tonight, and glad to be here.
So thank you, Anthony and Kevin. We're glad to have you as well. Thank you so much for saying yes to this. I know a lot of people can attest to the fact that sometimes it seems so hard to access the people with the information. So we really appreciate you joining on and speaking with us. Just a couple disclaimers and information for the participants. So this session is being recorded and we are gonna have it up on our website. So that's www.afrowaveto.com. So if you missed something, you don't have to go crazy in the chat. It'll be available for you afterwards. I think we're also looking at putting it up on Spotify. So if you just need audio format, that'll be there for you as well. Any questions you can put in the chat, but we do have a designated Q&A tab where you can send your questions, and we're going to try to save the last half hour for that. But like I said, if there are any questions in the chat that is something that we could address right away, then we'll try to. If not, we do see your question and we will get to it, I promise. We just want to keep it running as smoothly as possible. We are working with Wi-Fi. If anyone, drops off, we'll just join back in, pretend like it didn't happen, and keep it moving. But yeah, let's jump right into it. So both of you were actually on the creative side and now working with grants, and you've kind of seen a lot of the business side as well. We started with Anthony, so maybe Kevin, you can go first this time. What is it like for you in terms of the difference between both ends of the industry? What was that like for you to kind of transition from one to the other?
It's in some ways, it wasn't that huge a transition for me, partially because, when I was really active as an artist, it was a very DIY scene, do it yourself, doing your own shows. There was a lack of commercial support, mainstream commercial support for artists, period, but particularly Black artists working within, quote unquote, Black genres, Black disciplines. So, you're just used to doing for yourself, and trying to build community and all those sorts of things. There were very few of my peers at that time were making a living full-time as artists, right? So we always had multiple gigs. I always had multiple jobs. If I brought up my, the resume I would use to apply for a job, for example, lists only things that are relevant. But if I told you all the kind of things I did, to make money while trying to be an artist, we would run out of paper. But so that ethic has always been there. It's been a part of my life for 20 plus years. And once I started working with organizations like Dance Immersion that I mentioned earlier, or Unity Charity, or the CMRRA, that didn't really change. What it might have changed for me specifically in the sense that maybe 50% of my time was devoted to pursuing artistic endeavors, and then 50 was trying to make ends meet. And that equation has changed a little bit for me over time, where I am more and more embedded in the arts administration side. So like that equation has changed. And once I started working at Toronto Arts Council, where I've been for four years now, I think the biggest change has been a greater appreciation for actually the kind of a greater appreciation for actually even stuff like what we're doing here today, the need for things like this, the needs for organizations like Manifesto, House, Remix Project, Rise. I could go on and on, like naming organizations that are providing platforms for Black artists in this city. Because working for a funder, if I'm to be honest, I see the great strides that the arts funders, and I can, I'm not talking about funders like Factor, which is a slightly different model than what we have at Toronto Arts Council or at Canada Council for the Arts or Ontario Arts Council. But, I've seen shifts within those, Canada's major arts funders that are increasing their support for Black artists. However, I still see how far, we still need to go to support Black artists properly. So, that was a long-winded kind of meandering answer to your question, but, so the shifts for me personally haven't been too great, but it has given me a greater appreciation for the kind of gaps that do exist.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Anthony? What was that transition for you like?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna echo quite a bit of what Kevin said, but before that, I'll add something else for me too that's been great. Is I wouldn't even necessarily call it a transition from creative to business, but more an addition, as in the creative side's always been there, and I didn't have the business knowledge. But then, taking that deep dive into these music industry jobs has given me extra tools to add, to my overall knowledge. And I think that's helped me a lot, because this business knowledge kind of helps you strategize how you want to move in the industry as an artist, but then also, whatever creative moves you make will also inform your business strategy. So it's kind of this complementing of two essential sets of skills and knowledge that you need. And so, I'm saying this for everyone listening to, if you're an artist, definitely if you see an opening in a music industry job, I would say, consider applying, because even if it's not necessarily a job that you know for sure you want to do forever, you're going to learn some things that will help you at some point as an artist. But now, going back also to what Kevin said too about this appreciation for all the amazing organizations in Toronto and across Canada that are doing all these things to really support Black artists and just, helping really to teach these skills, it's essential and it's wonderful. And also same thing, Factor, it's true as Kevin said, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, Factor, it doesn't have the exact same model because the mandate is different relative to the arts councils and how it functions. But similarly, we've also made strides in supporting more diverse artists. Well, firstly, recognizing that we should support diverse artists, but then also, starting to implement strategies to try and reach them and make sure that, they're successful in their applications. So yeah, it's great. There's a lot of things more to do, but a lot of progress has been made in the last few years, and I'm optimistic for the future.
I agree. I think that interning, while I was in Toronto, I did a lot of interning, a lot of volunteer work, sometimes just being present. Like sometimes I wasn't even on the team that was supposed to do anything, but just being present and seeing the way that things run behind the scenes really helped me to change the way that I do things as an artist. So I think, your recommendation about trying to get something that's in music business or being involved in that kind of stuff really helps, because sometimes as an artist, it's like you only think about it from that perspective. And so even like doing Afrowave and having to be the person who's organizing and not the person who's performing was really helpful for me. Even writing grants for myself and so on, that definitely helped me out. So one thing I wanted us to kind of lay out as a foundation was the difference between grants and sponsorships and funds. Like we hear that thrown around a lot, grant writing and sponsorships and funds, but I don't know if everyone here kind of knows the difference. So I'm not sure if one of you just kind of wanted to take give us an explanation of the difference between grants and funds and sponsorships.
Sure. So I can start just with the Factor perspective, because we have the word sponsorship for a program. So, and that might be part of the confusion as well. So Factor, for those, if anyone doesn't know in the attendance, we are a public-private partnership. So we have money both from the Department of Heritage at the federal level and from the private sector, from specifically the radio broadcasters. And our mandate is to support the Canadian commercial music industry. So really what we're trying to do is stimulate the music industry economy and create jobs, and make sure that whenever we give funding to artists, that producers, studios, venues, everyone kind of gets paid, and there's just economic activity. Okay, so we have programs available for artists at all levels in their career, as well as for businesses, so record labels and songwriters and other types of organizations, not-profit organizations and corporations too. Most of our programs really have to do with, when you apply, you have to talk about how what you're doing is growing your own business. So if you're an artist, you're going to say, please give me this grant, and with this plan, I will grow my fan base, whatever percentage, or whatever kind of thing. And then we have another program, of which I am the project coordinator, called sponsorship. And this one works very differently from all the other factor programs, because in sponsorship, it's actually not about you, it's about your community. So if you apply to the artist programs, you're going to say, I am doing this business plan and it will grow my fan base. If you're applying to sponsorship, you're going to say, this is the plan or the project that I want to do, and this will benefit my community in all this and that way. So I'm just going to use one quick example, is the Afrowave, which we're very happy that we funded, I think at the end of 2020 or start of 2021, I don't remember, but it was through sponsorship. Same thing, Afrowave, it was Lexicon, he came with a proposal. He said, we're going to organize this big concert, the series of digital concerts that's going to be basically a platform for all the artists in the community, right? So it wasn't a project for Lexicon, it was a project for the Afrowave community. So for specifically for Factor, that is kind of the difference between sponsorship and all the other grants. Other grants is about growing your business. Sponsorship is about doing something that has an impact in your community.
Kevin,
I don't know if Kevin wants to, yeah.
Yeah, I think, Anthony started to lay out some of the key distinctions between an entity like Factor and the Toronto Arts Council. So, Toronto Arts Council is a not-for-profit, it's an arm's length agency of the City of Toronto. And to receive funding from the Toronto Arts Council, you have to be an independent artist, part of what we call an ad hoc collective, or a registered not-for-profit. For-profit entities and businesses aren't eligible to get funding from a funder like Toronto Arts Council. And, our focus is on providing financial support to artists and organizations with allowing artists to, get paid to do their work. And essentially, TAC exists to support the production and presentation and creation of art throughout the City of Toronto. There is not an expectation of a financial return. There really is just that. There's money available for artists and for organizations who are operating in a not-for-profit capacity to get some funds. Now, this highlights a bit of a tension, because there's no artist who wants to be a starving artist all the time and wants to live from grant to grant. You do not want to be in a situation where if you don't get a grant per se, your livelihood, your overall livelihood is at risk, right? So there is an inherent tension there that we, frankly, I don't know if that divide and that tension has been resolved, but getting back to the question, in my mind, one of the main differences between, say, sponsorship and the grant, and I'm not specifically talking about the programs at Factor, I'm just talking about the idea of sponsorship. Sponsorship, there's an expectation of financial return often, so if Coca-Cola is sponsoring an event, for example, it is because they expect their people are going to show up and maybe buy lots of Coke. They're going to see the branding of Coca-Cola, and it's going to have a positive impact on Coca-Cola's bottom line. Grants, on the other hand, are money that you don't have to return. There's no expectation that, Toronto Arts Council does not want to see profit. What we do want to see when we fund a project or fund an artist is that you complete that project. So if you apply to record a demo, what we expect you to do is record a demo, is to take our money and record that demo. If you are applying to, do a festival, same thing. You take that money and execute the festival. We do ask that all successful grantees, or that once they complete a project, that they report on it, but that's it. We're not expecting anything beyond the execution of the project you described to us.
And that's one thing that I want us to touch on a little bit later. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned that was the reporting side. Just based on the last grant workshop that we had, and just conversations around like with my peers and so on, a lot of persons don't know about the reporting side of the grants. Kind of like, okay, I have the application, I got the money now, let's just go do my thing. So that's something I definitely want us to touch on. But what I wanted to do first was just kind of, Anthony, I guess I'll go with you. Tell us a little bit about the grants that are available at Factor. Most of our participants, or the majority at least, is like emerging artists, independent artists, solo artists. So what are some of the grants that are accessible to that audience?
Great question. Very happy to talk about it. So we have two main programs that I think most people in the attendance would want to look at. The first one being something called artist development. So this one is really good, especially for people who are kind of near the start of their career. So don't yet have a very big fan base, or maybe are really just starting out, like don't have any music out, artists at kind of that stage. So the goal of artist development is to give you a subsidy towards your general artist expenses within some categories. So there's sound recording, so anything to do with going to the studio, paying a producer, getting your music mixed and mastered, things like that. Touring, everyone knows what touring is. Marketing, that includes digital, Facebook, Instagram ads, things like that. And then also video. So if you want to do a music video, that's part of it too. So for that grant, you can get $2,000. And then, so something about Factor, I should have said at the start, is we are in the business of subsidizing expenses that you are already incurring anyway as a professional artist. So our subsidy rate for the artist development is 75%. So what that means is if we give you this $2,000, we are basically funding 75% of your expenses. So you just have to show us, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more for the completion reporting, but in the completion, you're just gonna put your proofs of expenses and invoices and things like that. And it just has to add up to $2,667, because that number would be 100%, and then the 2,000 would be the 75%. And so this program normally is supposed to last around a year, but then if people need extensions for whatever reason, I mean, right now with COVID, everyone basically had an extension, which is totally fine. So it's possible for it to last longer. But yeah, this is artist development. This is the easiest one, I think, both to apply to and also to receive and then kind of do the work on it. And also similar to what Kevin said about the programs of the TAC, there's no expectation here of profit or anything like that. There's even actually no expectation of you having finished necessarily all the music that you said you would do or anything. It's really just a $2,000 grant for you to kind of get your career started. And if you had a dream to do an EP or kind of get a few songs that you want to have in a professional kind of portfolio, you can just get this 2,000 and you can do that. And then the second program that everyone should check out. So if you feel like you're at a stage that is a little probably further in your career than for the artist development, you can apply for this program called Juried Sound Recording. This one's a little more ambitious. So here, the minimum amount you can get is 10,000, but it can go up to 67,500, and that depends on how much you claim. So if you have enough expenses, you can claim that full amount. But essentially, for this one, you actually have to do a full album. And here, it is a little more in terms of like the stuff you have to do. So for sure, you do have to do the album and you have to release it. You can't take that grant and then not do the album. But yeah, there's a little more work in terms of what kind of stuff you have to write in the grant. You do have to submit a full marketing plan for how you are going to market this album and how you're going to create it, and you have to explain who your whole team is. But yeah, those are probably the two main artist programs, definitely the two most popular ones. And as you can see, yeah, the amounts are different, so you do have to pick wisely because you can only pick one of the two per year. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, sounds good. And you, Kevin, for TAC?
Okay, so yeah, TAC has funding programs for organizations and individuals. I'm going to limit the conversation to funding available to individuals. And so the first thing I'm going to say is our programs that are available to individuals, they're kind of two categories. One that we call arts discipline categories. So we have funding programs devoted to each, or not each, but specific art disciplines. So if you're a dancer, there's a dance projects program. If you're a writer, there's a literary program. And if you're a theater artist, there's a theater program. And music, there's a music projects program. So we have those, what we call arts discipline projects. And generally speaking, I'm going to come back to this because it's a little bit more complex than this, but generally speaking, you can get up to $15,000 through any of those project programs. And we also have what we call strategic programs. And that's for stuff like if you have a project that maybe it's multidisciplinary in nature, and maybe you're working in a library, you want to do some performances and exhibitions, whatever, in the library. There's an artist in the library program. There's an animating historic sites. There's a newcomer and refugee program. So, you know, and those, the names of those programs are kind of self-explanatory. They tell you what the projects, what type of things they're looking for in the name. I'm going to put a link in the chat. So it's, you know, you can click on it and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about in terms of the two types of grants. Warning, TAC's current website is lousy. It is lousy. Like, it is very text heavy. It's out of date. So you might look at the link and think, sorry, I forgot to put to everyone. Yeah, you're going to look at that link and you might find it difficult to decipher. I suggest you just reach out to me. Like, if you look at it and you find it's like way too much information, too difficult to access, I would then say, reach out to me and I'll actually point you in the direction of who you need to reach. And I'm going to put my contacts in the chat as well, so you can just contact me directly with any questions. Okay, so mostly musicians in here. So I'm going to talk about a couple, even though the music projects program isn't the portfolio I manage, but I can give you some high level details, point you in the right direction. And then we also have, TAC recently launched a Black Artists Projects program. So a funding program specifically geared towards Black artists. I'll talk a little bit about that as well and how you can access those. So the music projects program, there are actually two things that might be of interest to you. There's one that's called music projects, and it's for if you're doing a presentation, like it's kind of event focused, a festival, those kind of things. Or dissemination of some music work. You can apply to that program, and it's up to $15,000 that you can get through that program. Now, the deadline has passed for this year, but the next deadline will be in the first week in February of 2022. And then there is a music creation stream that has music creation program that has 3 different streams. One is called creation. So you can get up to $5,000 if you're in the writing and composition phase of a project. Then there is a demo recording stream, and you can get up to $4,000 for that. And then there is a full-length recording stream, and you can get $10,000 for that through that stream. Now, for the Black Artists program, I know it's a short turnaround time, but the deadline is October 7th. All right, so the Black Arts Projects program supports projects led by Black artists, Black artist collectives. And, when we say Black, we're talking about, the organizations are led by Black folks, Black focused organizations, and they're, serving, Black populations. But so this program supports, again, similar to the music program, there's a creation and development component. Where you can get, depending on whether you are, it depends, there are a couple of factors, but you can get up to somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 and it'll support, again, full creation, partial creation of works, whether you're starting from scratch or they're already kind of in process or in progress, sorry. They'll also fund, even if you're in the research and development stage, that might require you, maybe you're testing an idea for something you're working on. This might be an avenue for you to explore. And again, that's open to individual artists and artist collectives. There's another component of the Black Artist Projects Program that supports presentation. And so that's for the exhibition, presentation, and dissemination of work by Black artists. And it can be in any arts discipline, but we're mostly musicians in this room. So, I'm assuming that's what you'll be looking to do. It's important to keep in mind that for this component, though, it is really as presentation focused. So something like, Afrowave, I know when you've done your programming, and there's also often workshop components and things of that nature. This presentation component, it's not for that. This is strictly for the presentation. So, a performance-based events would be, the kind of thing we're looking at. Additionally, there's a mentorship component where up to $5,000 is available, where if an applicant wants to work with a mentor, has identified a mentor that they want to work with and acquire specific skills within a particular artistic modality or discipline, you can, again, apply to that component or that stream of the funds for up to $5,000. I'll put a link to all that in the chat as well. But
I saw that a couple persons, sorry, just had some questions.
Yeah.
Usually it's okay if they're sent in the chat as well, but I forgot this is one of those workshops where a lot of links are going to be sent, so they may get lost. So if you had a question, I think we're going to probably answer yours now, Gio, just based on what we're going to next. I think it's probably best if everyone just sends it in the designated Q&A, just so I can keep track of everything and we're making sure we're answering everybody's questions and not missing anyone.
Can I quickly jump in and just say, is it okay if we make a big document at the end, like a Google Doc or something, and we put all the links, because I had tons of links too, but I feel like if we put them throughout the conversation, so we can just send you all those links, that way people can check out all the programs afterwards.
So if you guys already have your links or a document with links, feel free to send them just to the email we were corresponding through, and then I can just forward everything to everyone. I'm actually going to put that in here for everyone. So you can reach out to me at operations@AfrowaveTO.com. If you're interested in getting all these links and you think you may have missed one or something, I can just send it to you. So just reach out to me there, let me know that you were in this workshop and that you just want the links. And then I guess Kevin and Anthony, you can forward me all that stuff afterwards.
Yeah,
sounds good.
Just seeing if we missed anything here. So Kevin, were you finished wrapping up?
I'm good.
Okay. So I know you mentioned some of the deadlines that were coming up. Anthony, I know you didn't touch on them. Are there any upcoming deadlines for the artist development or?
Good question. I should. So artist development is the same as the Black Arts grant. It's October 7th. So yeah, it's coming up soon. Jury sound recording, I believe, is December 2nd. It's near the end of the year. So that one there's more time. But yeah, if you want to apply to artist development, you should start now.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you so much. So everyone, make sure you're making notes, writing down these deadlines.
Also, artist development, there's 4 per year. So there's a lot. Jury sound recording is only 2.
Okay, and I know that there was previously, there's a rule where it's like you could only apply to
one of the 2.
Of the 2.
Yeah, so you have to pick carefully.
Okay. So everyone bear that in mind. So I just wanted to move on to the process of applying for a grant. I know that based on the grant, like I know Kevin, you talked about this a lot, based on the grant that you are writing, then it probably has different requirements. But just the typical requirements, I know someone asked, do you have to be from Toronto to get a TAC grant? just stuff like that. What is typically expected, and what can people expect to see when they look at that list of the criteria that's required? Anthony, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so FACTA, we operate at the national level. So you just need to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident or have other pieces of Canadian ID like this as well. And you can also be a Canadian living outside of Canada. If you're a citizen, that's okay. That's our only requirement to be eligible for a FACTA grant. But then of course, depending on the specific grant, there are some requirements. So I'm just quickly, because I saw a question in the chat. So I'm just gonna, because it's kind of related to that. Someone was asking about artists with no experience applying for juried sound recording. That's a great question. So yes, absolutely. Juried sound recording is not a restrictive program. However, artist development is restricted in that it's only people who really are near the beginning of their career. So actually, if you're too big as an artist, we're not gonna let you apply for this because we don't want you to take funding away from people that are starting out, which is the intended audience for that program. So only artists who have a rating, we have a rating system called General, can apply to artist development. But if you have a higher rating, you can only apply to juried sound recording or other grants. But juried sound recording, even with a general rating, you can apply to that if you feel like that's the one you want to do. That's totally cool.
Just before we get to you, Kevin, just letting everyone know, I know we started a bit late because we had a bit of a link issue. So this section may run a little bit into a couple minutes into the Q&A. We'll still try to wrap up everything on time, but I just want to make sure everyone's getting as much information as possible before we just cut it and go to questions. So just bear with us. Kevin, yes, typical requirements and what would be expected if you're writing a TAC grant.
Yeah, so, TAC only funds activity that takes place in the city of Toronto and supports artists that are based in Toronto. Now, if you happen to be working with a group of artists and some of the members don't live within the city limits, that's okay as long as the majority of the members of the group, let's say, 3 out of 5 members of a group, for example, live in the city of Toronto, then that's no problem. Yeah, and similarly to what Anthony was saying, you don't have to be a citizen necessarily if you're a landed, you have landed status, refugee status, or you're in the process of claiming any of those statuses, then that's fine as long as you live in the city of Toronto. And to be clear, by city of Toronto, we mean 416 area code or postal code starting with an M. Because I often get calls from folks who live in Markham or Whitby or Mississauga or something and say, oh, they have, and it's a great idea or a great sounding project, but unfortunately it doesn't take place in the city of Toronto. Other than that, I think I should also note that, and I think I'm fairly certain it's going to be the same for Factor, that all applications are done online for TAC. You have to create a portfolio within our online application system, which is called Smart Simple. You create a profile for yourself if you're applying as an individual artist, or if you're applying on behalf of a collective or organization, you have to, we have 2 different types of profiles. All you really need is an email. And once you provide an email and contact information, you're good to go. And when you sign into the portal, it'll show you all the applications, the upcoming applications that you're eligible to apply for. So if you create a profile as an individual artist, when you sign in, you'll see all the upcoming granting deadlines that any individual artist can apply for.
Yes, I'll jump in real quick. Kevin, you're right. For us, it's also all online. And similarly, we also have a profile. So you just make a profile in a portal. And then when you click on your profile, it'll show you there's a drop down of what programs you can apply to. And if you don't see the program that you wanted to apply to, that probably means that you don't have the correct type of profile. So for instance, if it's a business type of program, then you would need a corporation or something like that instead of being an individual. So you have to make a profile for that. You get the idea. Yeah.
Just to you, Anthony, I applied for, I think it was the artist development back when it was called the demo grant. A little while ago.
Yeah, that's a while ago.
I actually got it that year, which I was very happy, very accomplished. But if I'm remembering correctly, was there an approval time? I think I had to sign up like a week or a couple weeks ahead of time. I don't know if you can speak on that for people who don't
Oh,
already
for
have
your
a
profile. Yeah, so, okay, that's a good question. So we have this kind of thing where you sign up and then you're going to be lost in space for a couple of days, could be up to a week, because basically you need to be assigned to someone called a project coordinator. So at Factor, your project coordinator is kind of your best friend that's just there to help you with anything. You can call us, email us. So I'm a project coordinator for the sponsorship program that I spoke to at the start, but all the other project coordinators are wonderful. So you're going to be assigned to someone at some point, and they're going to review your profile. So they're just going to look at all the info you put to make sure that it's all good, and then they're going to validate it. And then from that point, you will be able to apply. However, this is a very underrated tip. I'm going to send that as part of all the links that I'm going to send. We have something called applicant resources, and it shows you specifically what all the questions are in all of the grant programs. So my suggestion to you is look at this link, look at the artist development questions while you're working on your profile, and you can start working on it on a Word document. That way, by the time your profile is approved, you'll already have your application ready, and you just need to copy paste all that stuff in, and then you're good.
Awesome. And is it the same thing for TAC, Kevin?
No. Ours is better. No. once I don't mean that at all. But it is just different. Like for us, once you provide the appropriate contact information and then hit submit, you're pretty much, you can just log in and start applying right away. The one thing I will say though is if you don't provide all the information we ask for, you won't be able to submit the, so if like your phone number is missing or incorrect or something, like
read all the instructions, guys, just like high school.
Yeah.
Don't miss it. Okay, so this part, reporting, as part of the application process, how do you recommend that artists prepare for this stage of the grant writing process? Are there any tips and tricks, anything that they definitely need to have? Kevin,
I have a great tip.
Kevin,
I don't know. Okay, I'll go. Okay, no, because I'm going to talk about my experience here. So I was a recipient of artist development a few years back. Okay, and I didn't follow that tip, and I totally should have. So you are going to have to submit. Essentially, you're going to make a big zip file, and you're going to put all your invoices and all your proofs of payment, both things. Okay, so if let's say you paid for a Facebook ad for your song, let's say $50, you're gonna have to put the invoice from Facebook of the $50 and also the proof, your credit card statement or whatever. Just you highlight just that bit and you can hide all the other parts, but just have to prove that you paid that part, okay? And what happens, and so of course, it has to add up to 2,667 because that's 100% and 2,000 is the 75%, okay? And so it has to add up. And we're going to give you a big Excel template, so it's super easy. You just have to put it in. Now, the part that destroys people, which destroyed me too, is don't do all of this the day before it's due. If you do all of these things as you incur the expenses, let's say you have 180 expenses in total, because I had like 150 or something. If you do it as you incur them, it takes 5 seconds to just put it in a folder in your laptop. It takes 2 seconds, then you're good. But if it's a year later, and now you have to track down 200 plus expenses, proof of payments and invoices, this is going to give you the biggest headache, and it's a big pain. Now, don't tell me when I told you this, you can ask for an extension if for whatever reason, it was too difficult, you couldn't do it, it's fine. We're not going to say, no, you cannot get it, it's okay. But, ideally you want to do stuff on time because it's just better. It's better for everyone. If you track down these invoices as you incur them, it's super easy. It's not too hard. And then I'll just quickly say about like there's also kind of like a writing part. You basically just need to say kind of what you did, like did it go according to plan or not. For artist development, it's actually totally cool. It's like I said, it's really just $2,000 for you to jumpstart your career. So you don't at all, like if you don't do what you said you would do, we're not going to run after you and say, hey, this is wrong and stuff. It's really fine. You're allowed to change plans. That's fine. During sound recording, like I said, you do have to release an album. So if by that time you haven't released it, again, we can give you an extension and you can release it. That's totally cool. But you do need to release that. And also it works differently in that we don't give you 100% of the money upfront, actually. I think it's 50% and it's probably capped at that. And then you get the other 50% once you've submitted your completion report with the proof that the album is out and all these things. So yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's easier to do a completion than an application. if you have all your materials and you're ready for it.
And for you, Kevin?
Yeah, you know, I would, that last point, that I think if you've gone through the application process and you've, because, you know, writing grants aren't easy. If you've done the grant writing, the reporting is going to be all right. Another thing, you know, and Anthony kind of touched on this too, is, or it was kind of implicit in what Anthony was saying. Like, I think it's important for artists to remember, particularly who are new to this process. And, you know, it can be intimidating. You know, you're applying to these institutions and having to report to these institutions. We're on your side. Like, the vast majority of my colleagues are also artists or arts administrators. Like, it's, you know, we have toes in both pools, and we want to see you succeed. We want to, you know, help you succeed. And when we're the kind of requirements that we put, like reporting requirements, you know, for TAC, part of it is we have to report back to the city of Toronto on what's happened, what we're doing with Toronto, the city of Toronto's money. It's not because, like, when you apply, we're like, the reporting process isn't me trying to hunt you down and make sure you spent every nickel exactly, you know, how you said it would be. It's more to kind of understand what happened. So with that big preamble, let me just say the reporting process is relatively straightforward. If you're successful, if your grant is successful at TAC, when you get the notification letter that your grant was successful, it'll tell you that from this day forward, you have 2 years to complete your project. But, you know, most people, you know, when you apply, you submit your own project plan, right? So let's say you've told us that you're going to be finished in 6 months. That's cool. So from the day you tell us that your project is going to be finished, we expect a report 90 days after what you selected as your project due date, okay? But as I said, we also give you up to 2 years. So if there's delays anywhere along that, you know, during your process, all you need to do is, you know, send us, whoever your program manager is, if it's me or somebody else, send us an email saying, hey, this is what's happening. Or we have to change the timeline, and we'll update your files accordingly, and it's cool. No big deal. But anyway, so that's kind of the administrative stuff behind it. What we ask for in the report really is, did you do what you said you were going to do? That is essentially it. You know, if you, you know, like what Anthony was saying, if you know, we're going to put out an album, said you're going to do an album, did you do the album? You know, and as part of, another thing I should add, as part of the applications, you know, you provide support material, right? And when you report, we also like to see the support material. So if, in the case, if it's an album, you know, hey, send us, you know, send us some music files, you know, send us links to where we can listen to that album. And then the other component of the report is the budget. So when you submit an application okay, pause for a second. We just pause and say most or many of the funding programs require you to fill out a budget. Some of them don't, because it's just a set amount. Like there's $5,000 you can get, and you're just going to get $5,000. We don't, you know, that's it. You do what, you don't have to provide a budget and break down what you're going to do. We're giving you $5,000 to contribute to your living expenses as you do your art. But for the projects that do require a budget, you know, so you're going to submit a budget at the beginning, and let's say you tell us your project is going to cost $20,000 and you need $10,000 from TAC. Cool. And then your project gets approved on that basis. When you're reporting, it's possible things have changed, and that's okay. If it ended up costing you only $17,000, that's cool. Tell us it only cost $17,000. and then tell us how you spent that $17,000. So it's important that both when you apply and when you report, or what's really important isn't that your final report budget is the same as the application budget, but what is important is that the your expenses and revenues balance. So, you know, if you say at the end that it costs $17,000 to execute your project, then you need to also show $17,000 worth of revenue. But, you know, yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Just quickly jumping in, just for 1 second, sorry, just to echo what Kevin said, that we are not out to get people. This is actually one of the biggest myths of public funding. I'm sure TAC gets this, OAC gets, CCA, we get this, you know, project coordinators, we're your friends, we're artists, we've applied to grants too, we know what it's like, we know that it's hard, and we're not out here trying to get you and be like, oh yeah, you got this part wrong. No, but this is also why it's important for you to contact us and build a relationship with us. Like the minute you get assigned a project coordinator, send us an email, give us a call, and just say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And then we'll be here. We're kind of like, I don't know, your financial advisor, you know, we're here to kind of, you know, advise kind of, if you start saying, okay, I don't know if I want to do an album or this or that, we'll tell you what program is probably the best for the scenario that you're in, so that you don't make mistakes and so that you don't, you know, run into issues with us afterwards. We're on your side and we're here to help you. So it's important also for you to be honest and transparent with us, and don't try to hide your plans with us, because it's not the right thing to do, right? Yeah, just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Anthony. So I know we have a bunch of questions here waiting for us. But one thing that I wanted to cover, because it is, I'm not gonna say a debate, but it's a hot topic amongst emerging artists, and that is professional grant writer or write the grant myself. So I just wanted to get, you know, your opinion, being persons that are on the receiving end of these grant applications, just what you think about it. And also, if persons are writing grants by themselves, what are some of the tips and tricks or things that are good to put into your project? I know you talked a little bit about that throughout the discussion, but just what can give them, for lack of a better phrase, a competitive advantage or a better chance of getting a successful grant? I don't know who wants to go first. Kevin?
I'm going to go first, particularly because the first part of the question, I have like, not strong feelings, but you know, feelings. So, you know, I'm not sure how many of the attendees read my bio or were here when I was talking about my career, as it were, but a significant portion of my life has been spent writing grants. So I mentioned working for an organization called Immersion. I did a lot of things there, but the main thing I did was write grants. I worked for Unity Charity. I did other things, but the biggest part of my job was writing grants. You know, I founded an organization called Mosaic Creative. I can't even remember what I called it now, but it's in my bio. And what I did was write grants, primarily for artists. And so my personal feeling, you might talk to other grant writers, they might tell you other things. We all, you know, we all can, for the most part, we all have the capacity to write a grant, you know, we can all do it. Where the big, but you know, everyone, like the grant, navigating the grant systems, you know, it isn't intuitive for everyone. In many ways, it replicates the kind of systemic and institutional barriers that, you know, privilege some over others. That is all true, right? But set those things aside. Let's pretend we live in a world where we're all starting from a similar kind of basis. For me, the real value in what like, I'm a great grant writer, and there's actually there's a dude in attendance I see named DeLorean. We used to work together. DeLorean can tell you I'm a good grant writer. And so, you know, I bring value, and I believe I bring value as a writer. But if I write a grant for you, you probably don't need to hire me again to write a grant. Once I've written a good grant for you and you have that in your possession and you can refer back to it and you can learn from that template I've provided you, you probably don't really need me to write another grant for you unless it really is a capacity thing that you like navigating the system is difficult for you and or you don't have the time or energy to do it, right? But so that's the first kind of thing I just like to put out there. Also, if you meet a grant writer who says to you something like, oh, I guarantee you, there are no guarantees. Any grant writer who says that to you is, you should run, you should not, or they're committing some kind of fraud and you don't want to get mixed up in that. Like there are no guarantees. Yeah. What was the second part of the question? Or maybe I should just let Anthony chime in and we can.
Sure, yeah, well, I'll echo. Oh, sorry, Karis, do you want to?
Just to remind you as well, Anthony, for those persons who, for whatever reason it may be, decide to write the grant on their own, what are just some of the recommendations, any tips or tricks, any hacks?
Yeah, okay, so just, great, thank you. Echoing what Kevin said, definitely be careful with grant writing. So I'm not endorsing nor not endorsing grant writing. Some people do it and they can be successful and some, like, it's totally cool, but just, yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of bad ones and a lot of ones that lie and say stuff like, I guarantee you this kind of thing. And also something else is, when you create your applicant profile, you are the applicant. The grant writer is not. He's just an administrator. They're just there to write the grant. If the grant writer says a lot of stuff that's not true and says, I'm going to put out 3 albums or whatever, say a lot of stuff that's totally wrong, and you get the grant, you are the one that's on the hook for it, and you are the one that has to submit the completion and then gets in trouble if all of a sudden everything is totally wrong. So if you hire someone, which is okay, you can, but just make sure you read what they put in the grant before they hit submit, and make sure you talk to them. And also, if we, the project coordinator, try to get in touch with you, make sure that the grant writer is also CC'd in the emails, or make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. Because sometimes also as an administrator, the grant writer will kind of be the one talking to the project coordinator, and you, the applicant, has no clue what's happening, while we're telling the administrator, hey, this part is weird, and this is strange, and this is that, red flags everywhere kind of thing, okay? Just be super careful about that. Now, the second half about what are some tips for yourself if you're writing it yourself. I mean, really, firstly, understand the underlying guiding principles of the funder that you're applying to. So for instance, we spoke a bit about the differences between Factor and TAC. So it's actually totally possible for you to, technically have the same project and get funding in both, but likely you're going to be emphasizing different parts of the project, to us versus to TAC. Maybe to TAC, it's going to be really about the artistic impact. And for us, it's going to be about, your business plan and how many fans to expect to get, that kind of stuff, right? So make sure that you don't use the Factor playbook, both at Factor and at TAC, because it's probably going to be a flop at TAC and vice versa. That's one thing. Next, obviously, make sure that you, reread your grant a few times, make sure that it's clear, make sure that it's, another thing, this is actually super important, is, how do I say it? Yeah, make sure that you don't necessarily need to try to make yourself be bigger than you are. You know what I mean? Like, be realistic and propose something that's achievable. So Factor, even though I'm saying, we're so business oriented, which we are, but we also know that it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to grow a business. So we don't expect you, if you have 100 followers, to get a $2,000 grant and then go to 10 million followers. We don't want you to do that. We just want you to have some growth, but we don't care if the growth is 100%, which is 100 to 200 followers, or if it's 10 million percent, you know what I mean? So sometimes people get the impression that they have to say that they're going to be the next Drake, and no, you don't have to do that at all. We don't expect you to do that, right? That's important. Now, yeah, Kevin, you can chime in if you have.
Yeah, yes, I agree wholeheartedly with everything Anthony just said. But if I were to emphasize the single most important tip, I would say, for a grant writer is contact the program manager, or in Factor case, the project coordinator. Just because, yeah, We can answer every question you have. And, you know, and as Anthony and I both said, we're on your side. We want to see you be successful. In TAC's case, first-time applicants, if you talk to the program manager, if you give them enough notice before the deadline, they will actually give you feedback on a draft of your application, right? So that's something to keep in mind and a valuable resource, I think, to take advantage of if you can. So yeah, I would say, in addition to everything Anthony said, contact the program manager. Whatever program you're applying to, whatever funder, if there's a contact name there, contact that person and ask all your questions.
Thank you. So I see that we have about 14 minutes. I just wanted to get some of these questions here answered. So I guess we'll just start from top and move down. So I think this is for you, Anthony. There was one in the chat that we didn't get to. Do you have an example of what the grant proposal would look like for the artist development grant?
Yeah, so we can't, unfortunately, take a successful application and show you. But again, I can give you some tips. I mean, what we just said right now is already, you know, like, be clear and transparent in what you're trying to do. You don't have to act like you're going to super overachieve. It's totally cool if you have, as long as your plan's achievable, this is good. One thing that I can say is our recipients list is public. Because again, we're government funded, so we have to let people know who we're funding. So there's a page called recipients. You're totally free, if you want, to click on that page and then just look at whoever got artist development and then contact them and say, hey, can you let me know what you wrote in your application? You know what I mean? If you know friends who got the grant, you can contact them and ask them. That's totally cool. Just, of course, we don't want to start seeing lots of recycled applications of everyone submitting the same thing. That's, you know, avoid that. But yeah, that's the closest you can do to doing what you asked for.
I think too, I haven't applied for it in a little while, but I know the first time I applied for the artist development after applying for the demo grant, there was a whole lot that was completely cut out. So I think it's a lot more straightforward now. If I remember carefully, there are a lot of requirements for the demo. So just from navigating it on my own, I think that it's pretty okay for emerging artists to kind of go through in terms of the questions being really straightforward.
One last thing too, I should have mentioned, is 75% of the score. That's another thing too, and I'm sure TAC probably has that too. There is a grading rubric for each program. Look in the guideline. I'm going to send you those links in the pack of links. There is a rubric. Read the rubric so that you know what you're being scored on. That's actually so important, right? So 25% for artist development is the writing stuff, and 75% is actually the music. So we've been talking about the plans and the marketing and all that, but actually make sure you submit your best song or your song that you think, you know, most people will enjoy, because 75% of the grade is the music.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anthony. This is for Kevin. If you're a Black artist and already submitted for a TAC grant in September, can you also apply for the Black Artist Grant?
You can, as long as it's for a separate project. So like, you can't, you know, if you applied to, I don't know, the theater projects program because you're working on a specific play, you can't then apply to the Black Artist Project for that same thing that you already applied for. But if you have a different project idea, yes, you can.
Okay, to Anthony, are there better odds of landing one of the two grants you spoke of? For beginner grant writers, where can we find a marketing model for an LP? I guess you kind of spoke.
Good question. Yeah, so, okay. I don't want to say there are better odds or not, just because everything depends on how many people are applying, you know, in each round, and how much funding is available. Although the last 5 years, our funding has been increasing from the government, so that's good. So I can't tell you, but historically, the approval rate has been higher for the artist development as opposed to the juried sound recording. So yeah, if you want, at least based on historical data, I would go for artist development if you're eligible.
Okay, thank you. This is for Kevin. Would these creative communities programs also apply to video projects?
They can. the defining characteristic of the Creative Communities Projects Program isn't any specific arts discipline. Like, you can apply to creative communities for anything pretty much. But what is important is that there has to be a component of collaborative art making or skill development. So if you're working on a film, if you have a film, you're working on documentary, short, feature length, whatever, you can't apply to the creative communities for that. However, if you are doing a series of weekend workshops with young people in a given community, and part of the project is they're working on a film, then that would be eligible. So it all depends on the nature of the activity, not the actual art discipline involved.
Awesome. Hope that answers that question. This is from Gio. I am a hip hop artist. I can record in my home studio. Can I assign the recording budget to other aspects such as marketing, beats, videos, merch, production, etc., mixing, mastering? I think this may apply to both.
Sure, I can start. So yeah, we have a list, that's also in all the links I'm going to send, of expenses that are considered eligible versus not. So some of those here, mixing and mastering, totally, that's part of the sound recording category. So that's eligible. And then I forgot what else there was. So merch is not, so we cannot give you funding for you to create merch. You can't do that. Production, I guess hiring a producer, yes, that's eligible. Marketing, that is eligible. Generally, and again, that's why I was saying, look at the underlying principles or guiding principles of the organizations. For us, it's stimulating the economy and creating jobs. So services generally are eligible. So we give you funding, you hire a producer, you hire a studio person, you hire an engineer, you hire a publicist, all these things. But then goods, generally, no. You can't spend capital expenses. You can't buy headphones or a MacBook or stuff like that. You can up to $200 for artist development, so it's 10% of the offer, but the rest generally should be services. But there's a big list in the guidelines, and this is also something you can ask your project coordinator.
So, yeah. And just off that, Anthony, because I know you were saying, for example, like I am a Canadian citizen who's outside of the country. So would those services apply to professionals who are outside of the country as well? So if I'm outside of the country, would I have to use Canadian services, or would I be able to use a Jamaican videographer?
Yeah, great question. Generally, really, it's supposed to be Canadian services. Although I think there may be some exceptions. I think it's like if, for instance, you're doing a whole album, if you have one producer who's not Canadian for whatever reason, and I think this is one of those actually where you probably have to actually reach out to us, and you have to actually submit some extra info to basically explain why it's so important that you don't use a Canadian service provider, and then I think you may be able to get a small portion. But generally, though, I would say it's no. It has to be Canadian. Yeah.
I know a lot of persons are on the move and having to collaborate globally now. So I just wanted to, make sure that we
Sorry, another thing just to add is that you are allowed to work with as many non-Canadians as you want, but just not with the Canadian expense, like not the Canadian part of the funding. Okay. Oh yeah, I should have said this, because it is it's not expected, but we assume that you are probably spending more than the grant amount that we're giving you, right? Because you're a professional artist. So if you get 2,000, you're probably spending more than 2,000 per year on your, maybe it's 5,000. So you're totally allowed to spend 3,000 on non-Canadian, but then just the money that you get from us has to be Canadian. Yeah.
And Kevin, if you could speak on TAC.
Yeah, same. I'm looking at the list of expenses there. Yeah, you couldn't use TAC funding to produce merch, but everything else, again, depending on what specific program you're applying to, everything else is eligible. The purchasing beats, I wouldn't characterize as a purchasing beats. You'd want to say it's like production costs or something. But it's it's all good.
Okay. I don't know if Anthony or Kevin had anything else to add, or if there was any other final question from the attendees. But we have gotten to the end of our workshop. So one thing that we do here is we like to drop our handles. Everybody kind of just drops their handles in so that we can network, even though we're not able to physically be present. So as usual, I will go ahead and take one for the team and go first. So you can find me at I am Karis. If you follow, I follow back. So feel free to go ahead. You may just find someone in here who has a service that you are looking for. We had a brand consultant in here, artist manager, we have producers and so on. So please go ahead and network with each other online. But with no further ado, I want to thank Anthony and Kevin so much for agreeing to do this and for being here and giving us so much information in such a short time.
Hey,
Go
one
ahead.
thing I just wanted to add, sorry to interrupt
You
you,
know,
is I urge everyone, you may not have any reason to apply to TAC in the short term, but if anything pops up in your brain and that you forgot to ask me, or you just have questions about TAC, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I am always game to have a conversation. If you even want to meet for a coffee in a post-pandemic or whatever the case may be, I'm down for all that. Just reach out.
Love it. Same, exactly same as Kevin. Always happy to chat. Like you said, we're here to help. We genuinely want to support artists. We want to see people be successful. So don't hesitate. Don't be shy.
Thank you. And of course, they'll be sending the links to us at Afrowave. If you guys want to reach out to me, if you had something that you wanted to ask or to get that resource list, I'm just going to I typed it earlier, but I just want to make sure that everyone can access it. So this is my email at Afrowave. So if you reach out there, then I'll be able to respond to you and try to help you out. But once again, thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you, Kevin, for all your information, kind of giving us some insight on what can be a very confusing part of being an artist. We really, really appreciate it. And to the participants and the attendees, as I usually say, this would not be the webinar that it was without you guys. And thank you for being so active in the chat and for all your questions. Our next workshop is a pretty interesting one. It is on rights and royalties. So we're going to be speaking with Keziah Myers, who's kind of had her hand in a lot of areas of the industry. So I think that's one that you guys would love to be at. We're going to have that link available for you on Instagram. Of course, you can register. Hopefully we have no link issues. I'll try to make sure of that. But thank you again to everyone. And I wish you all a good evening.
Thank you for having us. It was great.
Thank you.